Welcome to Raising Daughters, the podcast that helps parents learn the best ways to support their daughters as they navigate the high levels of stress, anxiety, pressure, and uncertainties so pervasive in our culture today. Dr. Tim Jordan is a developmental and behavioral pediatrician who has specialized in counseling girls for over 30 years and sheds light on the realities of today's young women in all facets of their lives. This is your opportunity to learn how to better support your daughters, making them feel safe, secure, and truly loved in the midst of life's ups and downs. Here is your host, Dr. Tim.
Hey friends, Dr. Tim Jordan back here with a brand new episode of Raising Daughters. And as always, I'm very grateful that you stop by here every week and listen in to learn some things about girls and raising daughters, supporting daughters. And as you know, sometimes I just blab about a topic, but often other times I will have a guest on. I've been worried. I have 4 grandkids now, 3 grandsons and 1 granddaughter. And so I've listened to my kids as they're raising their little kids, and also their friends who they have a lot of friends who we hang out with and all that. And I know every generation has its anxieties, but I worry that this generation, they're getting a lot of information about how to parent, and a lot of it's conflicting, and I think it's so much easier for them to grab lots of information, through their computers and through all the social media and things. But I don't know, I'm just a little bit worried that they're losing the sense of being able to trust their intuition because there's so much knowledge bombarding their brains, and I think they get confused, and I don't know. So I thought what I would do today is have an expert on, somebody who's actually a parent coach, and she's been doing it for 10 years, and she has helped over 100,000 parents in over 100 countries. Let me say that again: over 100,000 parents in over 100 countries through her coaching programs and also through her YouTube channel, and she'll give us information at the end so you guys can check her out. Her name is it Avital? I should have asked you.
Yeah.
Avital Levy, and she is in Israel. That's where she lives. So this is an international flavor today. And I asked her to come on so she could give us her experience about what she sees with parents today. And also, you travel a lot, right? Mm. You talk to people from all over the place. So I was also wanting you at some point to tell us what's it like for parents in other places besides the U.S., Canada. My podcast is listened to a lot of places as well, but it's mostly the U.S. But I wanted you first of all, welcome to the show. I appreciate you being on.
Thanks so much for having me, Tim. It's a pleasure to be here.
And she has a British accent because she was originally born there, and she spent some time in the States with her husband. She has 5 kids, by the way, ranging in age from 14 to 4. Did I get that right?
Yes, correct. Very good.
3 boys, 1 girl. But I want you to tell us really quickly just about your path to where you are, and then briefly, like what you do.
Right. Okay. Thank you so much. So actually, my background is in design. I come from the world of design and problem solving and strategy and branding and that kind of thing. And when I decided to become a parent, I was very nervous about the experience. And as a designer, I kind of wanted to, research it and think up ways of making this experience pleasant and elegant and solutions oriented, and all of that design thinking kind of kicked into action. Because the truth is that as much as I didn't want to miss out on this human experience, it didn't seem all that rewarding. It seemed really difficult, draining, exhausting, stressful, and, high risk. It's like a high risk, long life endeavor to become a parent. And so I became a bit obsessed with parenting. I read many, many books, dozens of books. And that is how I kind of started on this path of parenting. And eventually it went from being a hobby and my own personal, endeavor to being my work and my life's work. And along the way, one of the things I realized was I'm very lucky to have grown up in a very family oriented, very kind of pro-natal, pro-children, society that really supports community, that village that we all want, raising the child, screen-free time, all sorts of things, family meals, all sorts of things that I took for granted in my household growing up. And as I traveled the world and I saw particularly the crises in parenting in the US, actually, my years there with my very young children really kind of highlighted for me just how high the level of isolation and anxiety and distress for parents there. And it kind of quadrupled my, my passion and my interest in the area. And it went from being a personal need to being something that I felt more mission oriented, because I do believe, and I'll just say right off the bat, I really do believe that parenting can be the most meaningful project of our lifetime, and that it should be. But I think we're having a very hard time getting there as individuals and as a society because of the way, because of many different aspects. So that's the short story of how I came to this work.
So then you've been coaching parents, and in what kind of vehicle?
So primarily I do group coaching. I do some one-on-one coaching, but primarily I run a membership. And in my membership, I actually teach parents not how to do the nitty-gritty of parenting, not how to handle tantrums or how to, talk to a child when they've lied to you or that kind of thing, although we talk about all of that stuff too. But to me, that's really the end point. What I really try to teach parents is what I think is the foundation, which is family culture. How to build a culture in the home that helps us enjoy parenting, helps us relax more, helps us really imbibe our children with our values, with our vision for the world, because I think that we are leaders and I think that we are like CEOs, right? We've kind of established this new thing called our family, and we need the same level of training and inspiration and consistency and good habits and support systems and systems in general that CEOs need in order to run a smooth ship, in order to hit certain goals, So it's kind of this very mission-oriented parenting. So inside my membership, I teach parents all of these kind of family habits, I call them, which are none of them are, new novel ideas that I've come up with. They're all things that we all know, if we really think about it for more than a moment, right? Sitting around the family dinner table as a family without phones, getting out in nature, prioritizing sleep, all sorts of things that are kind of, you might think really basic, but are really challenging to implement in today's day and age.
Yeah, I think you said, if everybody would just take a moment, I think that's one of the problems is families they do, but seems like they don't have those moments to do. My wife and I, when we talk to groups, we talk about to begin with the end in mind. Stephen Covey's one of his 7 habits of highly effective people, but and like you were talking about, CEOs and all that. I think companies do it, and corporations do it, businesses do it. There are a lot of places take a step back and say, okay, what do we want? What's our values? What kind of habits? All that, but we don't do it with our families. So how do you get families to do that?
So that's a fantastic question. And really, I do take from the model of the CEO, the business trainings and the stand-up meetings and the, breaking down SMART goals and, getting clear on our values, what the top 3 values are and our vision for the future. And really having parents take a beat, for example, inside my membership every year, we start with vision. So we start with crafting the vision for the upcoming year, but also where we'd like to be in 5 years or in 10 years, It's really hard to motivate a mother who has a toddler, for example, to, work out. Okay. It's really hard to get up and move your body when you're so tired and you're depleted. But when you start to tap into your long-term goals, right? I'd like to be able to lift my grandchildren up. I'd like to be able to be healthy and independent for my kids. That starts to motivate you on a much deeper level, right? Or thinking, raising children is a marathon. It's not a sprint. So thinking about how the habits that I start, establishing with my young children are going to affect them in their teen years, in their adulthood, and well into their lives. So it's easier now to stick my toddler in front of a screen for several hours a day. But what will that do, setting him up for, delayed gratification or for patience or for proper cognitive development or social skills or verbal development or all of that stuff, right? So taking that long-term view, I think, is something that we borrow from the CEO life. But then there are many other things, CEOs famously have had this trend of self-care, right? What their morning routines, their meticulous, diet and nutrition plans and biohacking and longevity and those types of things that the top CEOs are very obsessed with. I think, parents deserve that same level of support. CEOs get the coaches and the support and the troubleshooting when things aren't going right. CEOs have metrics where they can measure, are we being successful? Are we hitting our goals? What's lagging? What isn't working? Who's not pulling their weight? So the metaphor runs out at some point. We're not running a business and we're not measuring profit margins or revenue cycles, but there's quite a lot to be gained in terms of just becoming the best leaders we can be and running an organization, right, that is staying on mission, that is fulfilling and meaningful for us to run. And that's going to hopefully result in the type of, dream family life that we had. That, you have some kind of song in your heart when you have a child, when you start a family. It takes tremendous effort and energy to find a partner and to have a baby. You do it for a reason. You do it for some kind of vision. There are those moments that you were hoping for, whether it's, watching siblings help each other, or sitting around the table and laughing together, or having a meaningful conversation with your child about their future, or just, the closeness and the warmth and the love. Those are all things we wanted. And then maybe life gets in the way and we find ourselves just caught up in the day-to-day humdrum, chaos of it all. I
interviewed an author a week or two ago. She wrote a book called 30 Phobia. And it was interesting because she was talking about how that 30-year birthday is sort of like a milestone, and there's a lot of 20 people in their 20s as they approach that birthday. They're like, oh my God, I don't have my life partner. I don't have my dream job. I don't have any kids. And so they start looking around at other people who in their minds are farther along, then they get anxious. And so they end up in that stage of their life, bringing a lot of anxiety into all that. So I'm wondering too, so I think our generation of parents, or the past generation or so, we've actually, I think, conditioned our kids to look outside themselves for, am I okay? Or what should I do? Or what's right? And all that. And I think sometimes that's where parents get caught. You're saying they need to huddle up together as a family unit and create their own family culture and use that as their vision and all that. But I think too often today they're looking outside for, oh my God, my kids are going to get behind and that kind of thing.
Yeah, absolutely. So we do have a culture of absolute comparisons. And I think just to steelman it for a moment, there's something healthy about our pro-social tendency of looking around us and measuring ourselves against our peers. There is something to the idea of somewhat being where you envisioned yourself being at that age or at that stage of your life. And for that to be somewhere along the norm of the curve, no one wants to feel left behind. And that makes sense. The trouble is that we're not measuring ourselves against our local, intimate, connected communities that have similar values to us, similar lifestyles, and similar resources. We're comparing ourselves to everybody's highlight reel. Yeah, exactly. The billions of people in the world and their best, most edited, most curated, most filtered highlight reels on, Instagram, say, where you're seeing them in their Christmas card mode, right? And measuring yourself against them. So I think that is where our brains just kind of break and we feel so confused with why we don't have, I don't know what it might be, the big family or the Lamborghini or whatever it is that people are comparing themselves to. And I think what would really behoove us is to bring back the localized community where I talk to my friend who has a similar lifestyle than me, lives in a similar climate with similar resources and a similar, religious and political culture that helps me make sense of my life choices and of where I'm going with all of this, and not to celebrities or to people in entirely different realities than our own.
And what are you seeing globally? Because you work with parents from all over the place and you travel and all that. So what are you seeing globally? Is it similar to what's going on in the States and UK and all that, or is it a lot different?
So it is a lot different because the world is a big place, but it tends to be that where the US and then the UK go, the rest of the Western world follows. And so I can only talk about, liberal democracies that are, somewhat similar in their structure, because it's going to be wildly different in other types of communities. But in those countries, what we have seen, the trends that we've seen over the last few decades, is that parenthood is being further and further delayed, right? People are getting married less and later. They're having fewer children and having them later in life. And that creates a very different type of parenting dynamic, because it's a model of higher investment in fewer children than we saw maybe, 50 to 100 years ago, where people would have more children younger and would have a much less time and resources spent per child. So it's become a very high investment endeavor. And older parents often feel this intense pressure to get it right. They often have to go through very taxing cycles of fertility treatments, a lot of long decades of dating to find their partners. It's a much different kind of game to build your family than it used to be. And then there's a lot that amplifies fears about development, about milestones, about making every moment count, about having financial resources that, parents in previous generations didn't expect to have for their children. It wasn't, the same level of pressure. So that's one thing. And then, of course, we have the social media echo chamber, which we already mentioned, but the endless online advice, which is often conflicting, as you said in your intro, that comparison culture really fuels a lot of second guessing, a lot of overwhelm, a lot of hesitance. I think it's good that there are podcasts like yours and like mine, and that there's good information out there. But there is information overload for a lot of parents, and they get stuck in analysis paralysis. Parents feel less and less confident in their choices and in their parenting and in their skills. And I think also being a little bit older makes you a lot more risk aware, a lot more, self-analytical. So that's another big trend that we're seeing now. And then there's also the medicalization of childhood, which as a doctor, I'm sure you could talk to much better than I, but the increasingly, pathologizing of what is often normal developmental, phases that kids go to, kind of now every quirk is becoming a diagnosis. And that's really putting parents on edge, thinking that they need to seek therapies and medicalization for every challenge, which all children, have temperaments and have personalities. And sometimes that becomes very, very overwhelming for parents today.
So one of the things that you do is you have parents develop their own family culture, which may look different than next door or anywhere else, but what's important to them? What do they value? All those kinds of things. What else do you do with parents besides that? How do you coach them along?
So I think one of the key things that I like to focus on is mindset. My background is that my grandparents were all Holocaust survivors, and one of the most famous Holocaust survivors, Viktor Frankl, wrote about the idea that someone can take anything from man, right? You could take everything from a man except for their choice of how to respond to any given situation. And I think one of the things that's happened in parenting, and I didn't mention this trend, but isolation has become a really, really big one, because not only are we having kids later, but we're also having them fewer children. So there are fewer cousins around, fewer siblings, and then further and further away from our family of origin. And neighbors are less likely to be interacting. Friends are less we've kind of lost that village in the US. There's a lot of anxiety about that isolation, that sense of being judged, fear of being judged, even fear of being criminalized for, letting your kid go to the playground or that kind of thing. It's really become a very high stakes and scary thing to just have a child. So back to Viktor Frankl and mindset, I think a lot of what empowers parents today is to reclaim their sense of control and their sense of mindset, right? That is similar to what I was talking about with the CEO mindset, with the idea of being a leader, right? How can I step into my leadership role, craft something intentionally, deliberately, the way I want it to look? Because I think, look, at the end of the day, technically, parents are shaping the future, right? You're raising the future generation. So how do you raise a future that you believe in, right? That you're excited about, that you're passionate about, that you're happy to contribute to. A lot of the kind of fear around climate change and that kind of thing, or just the world wars and has led parents to feel like, oh no, I can't even bring a child into this world. What kind of future are we leaving them? Is it even responsible? And I think that, that also feeds into that underlying, sometimes subconscious anxiety about raising kids and the future in general. And so I think it's very beneficial. One of the things I really coach people to do is to develop optimism, realistic optimism. We're not talking about being, unrealistic or seeing unicorns and stars and rainbows where there aren't any, but optimism, competence, right? My ability to withstand things, my ability to handle what life throws at me. One of, I think, the repetitive thoughts that many of the parents that I coach have in the back of their mind without even noticing it is, I can't handle this. It's too much for me. I've messed up, right? Every parent I've ever coached has a story that they're telling themselves about how they messed up. I didn't breastfeed for long enough. I yelled at my child when they were 3. I went to work too early. Some story that they say, that's why my child is acting out. That's why my child, isn't making friends. A lot of this is just normalizing regular day-to-day struggles of raising kids. When you live in a culture like mine, where there are lots of kids around, you see that, no, that's how, that's how it is always, not just because of something you did or didn't do. But then also just quietening those noises and stepping into the role creatively, right? Energetically, excitedly, with passion.
Another thing that you prescribe a lot, I think, You wrote a book a couple years ago called Reclaim Play. Is it right?
Yes,
Yeah.
correct.
And
Yes.
so obviously, so I think you believe strongly that we're not giving our kids enough opportunities to just play. Talk about that for a moment.
Well, 100% we're not. Play has declined rapidly over the last decade and 2 decades and further back. We used to see childhood, even when I was growing up, children spent most of their time playing. And it's really how Mother Nature intended it, because when children play, they learn everything they need to learn naturally and enjoyably, right? It's pleasurable for them. They actually want to do it. But they don't just play to pass time, right? It's not idle. It's where they learn all these very critical skills, from cognitive development, social development, physical development, etc. Right? This is, this is so well researched, and it's really been, the evidence is there from over 30 years of research. Children playing with blocks improves their math scores in high school. Like, it's really an incredible correlation. And unfortunately, that has been replaced with scheduled activities, with supervised activities, and of course with screens, right? With screen time, which, beyond any issues that it might have to their sedentary lifestyle, to their eyesight, to their cognitive development, is simply taking away time that they need in order to develop well. And when I say play, by the way, I don't mean a parent sitting on the floor and playing with them, although that has its value. I mean independent, self-directed play. And the cool thing about reclaiming play, and the reason I wrote the book, was because I was alone in a country where I knew no one, had no support. My husband was doing a medical residency, so he was away all the time, night shifts, weekends. And I had tiny kids. I had like a baby, a toddler, a 4-year-old, and I ran a business. So and I didn't have any household help, and I did not know what to do. I did not know how to manage my life. I was exactly in that mindset where mums are thinking, I can't handle this. It's too much for me. I'm messing up. And what I noticed was that the one thing that just gave me this relief, and I didn't need any budget for it, and I didn't need any extra pair of hands for it, was when my kids were playing independently. When they suddenly got themselves into a game, and it wasn't with a screen, they're playing with trains or with dolls or, tag, whatever they're playing. I saw how happy, healthy, better behaved they were, how much more relaxed I was. I was able to get some self-care done, my work done, my housework done. And it just, lit a fire in me to say, wait, this is what it's supposed to look like. It's supposed to look like kids playing and adults, shuffling around the house doing what they need to do, and not constant, conflict and stress and butting heads and chasing them down, and entertainment, right? Like that, I didn't need to be exhausted with one more task on my to-do list, and now I need to entertain them. So look, bonding with our children, yes. Attaching with our children, yes. Quality time with our children, yes. Teaching our children, yes. But then also yes to independent play, which offers us a reprieve and offers them the opportunity to develop the way that they need to develop optimally.
I've mentioned this, I think, in my podcast before. Probably I always forget where I say things, but people ask me all the time, are kids different today? They read about the levels of anxiety and depression in girls, blah, 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 all that stuff. And so what I tell them is when they come to a week of my summer camp, so there's no electronics, no phones, none of that stuff. And they're away from their family, which is not meaning they have bad families, but they're just away so they can be more independent. What I tell them is, and this I'll never forget, that summer of COVID, we decided to have camp. Most of the people we know who own camps did not have camp that summer. We decided we'll make it smaller, and we'll make our own little cocoon. And I never forget how happy they were just running around. And the same thing happens every summer of camp, which is coming up, which is when you get them in an environment where there's no phones and they're actually paying attention to each other and they have free time and to just hang out. We have lots of downtime because we feel like they need that. They're no different than we were 20, 30, 40, whatever, 50 years ago. They're the same, but they just need the opportunity to have that time.
Well, that's so true. And the main thing, really, no one needs to buy my book, because the main thing is to get out of the way, right? That's the most important thing, is to just give them the opportunity, which they don't really have. We're obsessed with safetyism, right? And constant supervision. Yeah. But kids need to be able to try their hand at, building a raft, or, building their own kind of fort, or things that involve some heavy things, or some tools and machinery and that kind of thing. And privacy, not complete privacy. I'm not saying, go crazy, but giving them that space, in nature, on the beach or whatever, to play, to build the sandcastle, and the time away from the screen, which involves a lot of boundaries, which parents today are a little bit phobic of, right? No one is comfortable setting boundaries anymore, which might be another big difference between previous generations and today. And the boundary around the screen is really something it's a crucial 21st century parenting skill that we have to learn in order to allow our kids the opportunity to just have a childhood, really.
We're talking with Avital Levy. She is from Israel, and she's a parenting expert, and she's a parenting coach. She's also the author of a book called Reclaim Play. I'm going to ask her at the end here to give us her contact information. I want, if you would, just for a moment, talk about gentle parenting, because I hear a lot, and this is my judgment, is that parents end up doing too much talking and not enough boundary setting. And my wife and I have been teaching parents for, I don't know, 35 years or something. And so we don't like spanking, we don't like yelling, any of those things. But yet I think that the pendulum has swung way over here. And now it's kind of like, sometimes you just need to say, we need to go without a 30-minute diatribe.
100%. 100%. So I think the original, writers of the gentle parenting world meant to really just teach us to be authoritative parents with high expectations and high support. And that's very well evidenced, and it's a really good path. Unfortunately, I don't know if it's because of content creators or just the way trends go, but it has slipped and slided and kind of suffered from concept creep, right? Where a concept means something at the beginning, and then it slowly morphs into a more extreme version of itself. So now I think gentle parenting has somewhat become synonymous with permissive parenting. Yeah. And permissive parenting is not good for kids. And I'm thoroughly against spanking, and I do my best not to yell or to punish. I don't think those things are very effective.
You've yelled at your kids?
Listen,
oh my God, wait.
Listen.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
I won't pretend it's never happened. I yell at my kids, and I apologize when I do. I don't think raising your voice is very dignified or very effective. But I think there is a time and a place for a sharp tone and a very clear, firm directive. Yeah. And I will say that, unfortunately, the research is pretty clear that permissive parenting is even worse than authoritarian parenting. So the results are not good for kids. It's a huge part, in my opinion, of why we see the spike in anxiety and depression amongst young adults today. I think it's a huge part of it. I think it's very, very difficult to transition from a home like that into the real world and not feel complete whiplash. And so gentle parenting today has definitely suffered from many of the side effects that you've just mentioned. Over talking is a big one, even over talking to toddlers, right? Forget teenagers, but even toddlers. Over talking is a big one, negotiating, but also just simply being uncomfortable with your leadership role and setting any boundaries to begin with, having any expectations. There's this kind of underlying message that kids are gurus, that kids are infinitely wise, that kids are born into the world complete and whole, and it's just our job to let them guide themselves and make their own decisions, whether it's about their education or about what they want, for their birthdays and Christmas and the rest of their life, or about even medicalization. These are decisions that are left up to children. And I think it's deeply unfair on the children. I think it's an abdication of our parenting role. I think the proof is in the pudding. It's simply not working. And so, yes, gentle parenting is a great idea in theory when you stick to the original idea. But when you lean into the permissive parenting side of it, where parents are saying up front, on camera, I don't like setting any rules for my children. I don't like telling my children what to do. I don't think it's up to me to tell them that it's enough sugar or enough screens or bedtime. They should listen to their bodies and make those decisions for themselves, And you're laughing because, Dr. Jordan, you've raised children, but that, I think it's something easy to slip into when you have a very young child. Yeah. Unfortunately, you get mugged by reality as time goes on and you realize that's not going to work.
Yeah, my kids sometimes tell us, because they've been watching their friends parent, and some of them are parenting the way you're describing the gentle parenting thing, and they're saying those kids are a mess. They're out of control. And the parents are a mess because they're making it harder on themselves than they probably need to.
Yeah. They're just not using the range of tools that are at their disposal. But also the kids, I think, really feel deeply unsafe. I mean, I think of kids kind of like sometimes they're a little bit like tourists in a completely new destination, right? They don't know the language, they don't know the rules, they don't know how things work, they don't understand the currency or the public transport. And we're their guides, we're their tour guides, because we've been around a while and we have a fully developed prefrontal cortex, and we have, life skills and language skills and all these things that kids simply don't have. And unfortunately, parents who fall down this trap of gentle parenting have to be reminded that children are just children. They're gorgeous, they're wonderful, they're whole human beings. They are absolutely valuable as they are, in terms of how lovable they are and how worthy their life is. But they're children in the sense that they are not fully developed, that they don't understand risk assessment or delayed gratification or the way the world works. And so they can't be left to their own devices to decide whether to wear a seatbelt or not, or when to go to bed or not, or whether to say please or thank you or not. It's just not fair to them, because like a tourist in a new destination, if their guide would just say, well, listen, I trust you, whatever you want to do, you think what's appropriate, you decide how to abide by these laws and use the bus system. And right, it would be very unfair. That would be abdication of the guide's role. You're there to tell them how it works, help them, for crying out loud. It's really unfair to just leave them to their own devices. They're going to make some pretty detrimental mistakes. And I think that's where the gentle parenting world has gone, at this point.
We're talking with Avital Levy. She is a parent coach, an author. And I'll give you she will give us her links that you can contact her if you'd like more information at the end of the podcast here. We're about done. I two things. One of them is I did a podcast about a year ago, I think. I interviewed some high school seniors. They were I do a support group every 2 weeks for high school girls. And they were talking in group about how freaked out they were about growing up. They didn't want to grow up. They're scared to grow up. And I've known these girls. They've been in my camps. And so they were very animated about it. So I had them on a podcast. So I interviewed them. So, and they talked about all the uncertainty and the anxiety about growing up and all that. And what they came to by the end of the podcast was they felt that one of the reasons why, probably the main reasons why they were where they were was because their parents had done too much for them. And they hadn't allowed them to solve problems, think through things, overcome challenges, all those kinds of things. And so they felt like, I'm not equipped. I'm going to go off to college or somewhere in the world, and I'm not equipped. So there's some anxiety, of course, and a little bit of uncertainty when you go off to another level of your life. But they bring a whole lot more because they haven't developed the optimism. They haven't developed the tools and the skills and the confidence that says, I can handle it.
Yeah.
So it's kind of sad.
Well, that's exactly right. And there isn't an emphasis in the gentle parenting world on resilience whatsoever. So there's this belief that what doesn't kill me makes me weaker, and that every experience is a damaging experience, that every insult is a trauma, that every time I don't get my preferences met, I'm somehow scarred for life. Yeah. Right. And that's a really problematic perspective for children, because unfortunately we know how our systems work in our bodies. If you don't expose children to some germs when they're kids, it doesn't make them stronger, it makes them weaker. They do need to be exposed to germs in order to learn how to handle them, and that's what actually builds a strong immune system, because it's anti-fragile, right? And I like to remind parents of Nassim Taleb's idea, where you have fragile substances like glass that break under pressure, and you have non-fragile substances like steel that don't break so easily under pressure. But then you have anti-fragile substances like muscle mass that get stronger under pressure, that actually need the pressure or else they atrophy. And kids are like that. Kids need some stressors, they need some pressures. Every time you think, oh no, my child was rejected, my child is frustrated, my child has to wait for something, my child is disappointed, my child's feelings were hurt. That's not a time to fret. That's a time to secretly celebrate and say, yes, I built my child's immune system up. I'm building a stronger child. They're going to be able to handle life's ups and downs. And it's really all about that kind of old phrase of clearing the path for the child, but rather preparing the child for the path. I live in a war zone, and it's something that we deal with on a day-to-day level in a very intense way. But one of the things parents around me say a lot is, oh, this whole generation is traumatized. And I personally won't stand for it. I don't think that at all. I think just because you live through a traumatic event, even if it's objectively traumatic, capital T by definition, only about 10% of people will have any symptoms of trauma further down the line. And I say this as someone who had clinical PTSD from terror and war in my teen years. It's only made me stronger. It's only built my resilience. It's, even if you do have even if you do have lingering symptoms after trauma, it can still be a gift in your life. It can still be, there are silver linings to struggle. Now, we don't want struggles that are going to crush our children. There is such a thing as too much pressure and too much trauma, and traumas are real, and PTSD is real. But the idea that somehow what doesn't kill us makes us weaker is simply not borne out by evidence. The strongest people that you've ever met in your life, that I've ever met in my life, went through things. They overcame things. That's what made them strong. And if you just have a cushy and protected life with no responsibilities, not even chores to do around the house, if you've never even washed a dish, you're going to find life really abrasive and much more difficult to handle. So we're not doing our children any favors by treading oh so gently, right? It would be much more beneficial to them to focus on mental strength.
We're talking with Avital Levy. Thank you. I love your passion. I'm taking up too much of your time. Can I ask you one more question?
Yeah.
It might be interesting with all your experience coaching parents and traveling and speaking and training and all that, plus your own kids as well. I'm wondering if you could go back in time before you started. Is there anything that you know now, or what's the most important thing that you know now about parenting that you wish you had known 14 years ago when you started your parenting life?
It's a great question.
I know there's a lot of things that are important.
Yeah.
About anything that in your...
I think it might be this point that we've just discussed, which is that children are anti-fragile and that you want to speak to their strengths. It's that, anyone listening to this podcast is likely really blessed in the sense that they live in a place that has relative peace and prosperity. And it's very, very important to keep that in mind and keep that perspective in mind and stay grateful for that. But there are ailments of prosperity that we don't notice. Anxiety and depression are illnesses of the prosperous. They're illnesses of the peaceful. When people have a cushy, good, protected, life, that's when those illnesses rear their heads. And so we sometimes look for challenges, to toughen us up when those challenges aren't presenting themselves in their regular day-to-day life. I will say that even in peaceful and prosperous societies, there's disease and there's financial downturn and there's school shootings and there's hurricanes and there's lots divorce, many different things that you could be struggling with. But I think it's just important in our generation to keep in mind that those struggles, whilst they are real, they are also useful. They can be used to our benefit. They can be used to strengthen our mindset, just like Viktor Frankl, from the depths of Auschwitz said, no, I'm going to rise above. You can't take away that freedom from me. And I'm not sure why, but in today's day and age, we've kind of given over that power, right? Given over that power over our mood, over our mind. And with your permission, Dr. Jordan, I'll just phrase this directly, specifically around girls. I think as a girl myself and growing up, I was definitely conceived of and labeled myself as hypersensitive and emotionally volatile and very on this emotional roller coaster. And you can excuse it through hormones, or that's just how girls are, or that's just what women are, or, but I don't know, as someone raising a girl, one of the things that I focus on is actually emotional mastery. I think emotional expression is good. It's good to be able to name your feelings and to express your feelings. But I think we are encouraging a whole generation to be driven by emotion and to make decisions based on emotion and to be at the whim, in fact, of their emotions. And I think that's weakening our girls very much. It definitely weakened me. And as I said, I say this as someone who's overcome PTSD and pretty crippling anxiety. And a lot of, sensitivity and insecurity and all of those things, those are overcomable. That's not a life sentence. That doesn't need to define you. And you can become strong and stable. And I think we need to put a little bit less focus, like the gentle parenting puts on emotional expression, and a little bit more focus on emotional stability and mastery. That just because I feel it doesn't make it true. My feelings pass. I can overcome. I can drive this ship. We spoke about being a CEO. I think our children need to learn to be CEOs of their own bodies and minds. And especially our girls need to learn that they are not at the whim of what everybody thinks about them or even of what they think about themselves. They can overcome that and move forward and take the next right step and feel empowered and build that mental strength and mental toughness, which we're all going to need at some point or other in our lives. So yeah, going back, I think I would talk about that. I would talk about mental strength and emotional stability.
That's beautiful. 34 years ago, we started our weekend retreats and summer camps. And one of the reasons was my wife and I had been teaching some weekend retreats for adults, personal growth. And one of the things that we found was they were struggling maybe with something in their life now as a 30, 40, 50, whatever year old, in their marriage, in their life, whatever. And once they could get away on a weekend retreat and look at it, most of them, the seeds for those issues as adults, the seeds were starting in their childhoods. They had a lot of unresolved issues, unresolved emotions that they hadn't had the chance to or the ability to or whatever to work through. So now they were carrying with them into adulthood and or their parenting. And so we thought, well, why are we waiting until people are 50 to look at this stuff? So part of what we do in our camps is we have a circle time in the morning. And, there'll be 25 girls sitting in a circle and we'll talk about life things, emotions, understanding your emotions, expressing your emotions, handling adversities, talking about friendship, whatever's on their minds, we talk about. And I think some parents have this sense of, oh, this is a camp for troubled girls or, girls in trouble. And I tell them, if I walked into any one of your kids' schools and just grabbed the first 25 girls I saw, that's who's sitting in that circle. That they all have stuff that they experience in life. Some of them have more intense things than others, but they still can relate on that level. And so I think kids, boys too, I think kids need safe places where they can talk about those things so they can make better sense of it, so it doesn't end up following them in a negative way into their teen years and adulthoods.
Absolutely. And it's amazing that you're providing that. And I think parents can also provide that in their homes, right? You build the right kind of relationship with your child and you hopefully become the shoulder to cry on and the listening ear, and also that coach that tells them they can handle it.
So tell parents how they can find you and find all the resources that you offer.
Thank you so much. So if anyone's listening to this and they just feel like, I'm drowning in a sense of chaos or overwhelm and ready to stop that survival mode and really feel like they're thriving, then I do have something for your listeners specifically, Dr. Jordan, which is the Unbreakable Family Kit. It's a quick start guide, a simple and actionable roadmap to create a calm and connected family dynamic. And I'd also invite them onto a breakthrough coaching call with me. And so if anyone wants to grab that for free, just DM me the words Raising Daughters on Instagram. And my handle is @HighFamLife, and that will be yours. So that's Raising Daughters to HighFamLife on Instagram. And I can help you get out of survival mode and into a family life that you love. If you want to watch my videos, I'm at HighFamLife over on YouTube. And my book that Dr. Jordan kindly plugged is called Reclaim Play, and you can grab that on Amazon or on Audible.
Is it H-I-apostrophe-fam?
It's HIFAM.
Oh, no. Oh, I have
LIFE.
I goofed up.
Yeah. And the website is highfam.com. And everything will be there. But if anyone wants that Unbreakable Family Kit, they do have to DM me on Instagram for me to be able to send that to them.
Okay. So as always, I will put those links on my show notes. So those of you who are walking in the park right now or driving your car, please do not type while you're driving. I will have those in the show notes. So just go to the website at drtimjordan.com and check out the podcast and the show notes. It'll be there. Thank you so much for all that you're doing. Your parents are lucky to have you. Wherever it is that you're coaching, you have great passion, you have good experience, and you have a really healthy perspective. So I'm glad that there's some healthy parenting and coaching and advice out there.
Thank you so much. That means so much coming from you.
Well, that was interesting. I'm really glad she came on. I really was interested in her perspective, having traveled all over. My wife and I have traveled now and given talks. I think now it's 14 countries, but she's done more and she's coaches parents at a lot more places than I have. So it's nice to get a sense of that. And also just another way of looking at our parenting where maybe we can start trusting ourselves more, not be so overwhelmed with information. It's good to get, I think it's great to get information. I've written 7 books. I do this podcast. I think information is good as long as it doesn't overwhelm people. I think it's good to take bits and pieces from lots of different places. That's what I did with my parenting years ago. And I still do. I still take bits and pieces from all kinds of places. So I think it's good to sample, grab pieces that fit for you. And as Dr. Spock used to say, relax, you're probably doing a better job than you think you are. And I think that's true for most parents. I'll be back here in a week with a brand new podcast. Check out the website at drtimjordan.com to get the links to Avital's website and get her free gift and all that. See you back in a week. Thanks so much for stopping by.
Thank you for tuning in to this episode of Raising Daughters. Hopefully you've learned something useful about girls and young women and how to help them navigate the pressures, challenges, and opportunities of modern life. If you want to become a more effective parent, keep listening to the show at drtimjordan.com and let the conversations shape you. Build that one-of-a-kind connection with your daughters in the most profound and meaningful ways possible, shaping them into strong, confident women of the future. That's all for now. See you next week for another episode of Raising Daughters.